better than yesterday. Yeah. Yesterday we didn't have any class. I'll reiterate on whatever we have discussed yesterday. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So yesterday this was our thought process, right? I wanted to deploy an application on Tomcat server, right? So for that I have found out some steps, whatever steps they are. So don't worry about the steps there. Steps can be easily Googled, right? Once you know the steps, okay, you should find out the steps in such a way that it should not ask for user input. That's the first prerequisite. So for example, I have seen uh, how many of you are new here? Do you know about Qt DevOps issues? How to raise issues to DevOps? If you are having any doubts, how are you raising issues? Okay. Manikanta around? Okay, no, fine. So today I'll ask Satish to send a mail, but remember this link or write down this link. If I'm not wrong, this is the stuff. Yeah, github.com/qtdevops. In there is DevOps issues. All right, here you will see issues tab. Any problem which you are facing, please raise the issue over here. Okay, and any people who can resolve also can comment on it. It's not only me or quality thought responsible over here. It's a community. It's much like Stack Overflow, right? And there are some issues also which were closed. For example, there are 39 issues which are closed. So after point of time, you might see some issues over here where you can find out, okay, I'm getting this error, so probably the resolution is this, right? So please follow it up over here. And here I have seen couple of issues where they were trying to automate, but it asked for user input, but it was in Jenkins, not in Docker world, because there was no question posted on Docker yet. Okay, there was one on Kubernetes. But the whole point is, whenever you're automating anything, right, if it asks for user input, your automation is stopped. DevOps మొత్తంలో గుర్తుపెట్టుకునే విషయం, let it be Jenkins, let it be Ansible, or let it be anything, it should not ask for any prompts. Do you want to continue? Please enter password. If you are getting these stuffs in your automation scripts, that means that your script is going to be failed, right? I have 2 or 3 questions which had the same problem, right? Similarly, if you try to do the same steps in Docker, you will get the same thing, same error, right? So always try to find out the steps in such a way that it will not ask for user input. So for example, if you want to install any softwares, for example, you do yum update in Red Hat world, okay, so sometimes it might ask for yes or no update also. So better give yum update -y. Similarly, whenever you are installing any softwares on the Red Hat version or Debian version, add -y to it, so that in some cases, whenever there is a prompt, you have entered the value. You say that, okay, whenever you see anything, take yes as my answer. Okay, so I want you to do that, because if you get a prompt and you are trying to build the image, your image building will be failed. As simple as that. Are we good? Right? And this prompt issue will be there throughout DevOps. ఇక్కడ మాత్రమే కాదు, మన DevOps మొత్తానికి ఇదే ప్రిన్సిపల్. This is the root principle. It should not ask for user prompt. Any user prompts which you want to pass it in the command line itself. Now, how many of you know MySQL installation? Okay, for example, if you Google for it and if you go for MySQL installation, it will ask for please enter your password. What is the password which you want to set for the database? How am I going to automate all of that? Right? So the answer for that is, basically there are many readily available scripts which have done that. Either use it, or if you don't know how to search for that, whenever we enter password during that installation, it will be stored in some file, right? Do you agree to that? Okay, so rather than it asking you, save into that file directly. That's what the other scripts which I'm trying to tell. For example, probably in few days we will be learning something called as Ansible or Chef and all of that. In there we will be using reusable stuff which was already being done. So in that, the users do the same thing. Rather than MySQL asking you for the password, these guys set the password before it asks, so that it will look into that file. Okay, there is a password. There is no need for me to ask. That's how the things would be. It should not ask for prompts. That is for sure. Okay. Now, second kind of solution. In Docker, you have to install something, but it has no CLI installation. You have to do it manually. Then how will you do it? So create a Docker container, do all of the work manually. Okay, and then there is a command called as Docker export. Okay. I am not telling that in the class because that is the most worst way of using Docker. Right? But that is the last case. అంటే మీకు ఇంకా ఇన్స్టలేషన్ CLI నుండి కుదరదు. It is not possible. But still you want to build a container. Then what will you do? You will create a container like Docker run -it ubuntu bin bash, and then in that you will install all of the stuff manually. Once you have finished that, then you will export, come outside, and then you will export a command called as Docker export, and you will give the container ID and you will get a tar file, and you have to use the tar file as a container whenever you want to. But that's a horrible way of using Docker. Okay, because you are using binaries, not text files. No one will understand what your image consists of. Okay, in enterprise, that is the last case scenario. We will never go to that. We don't want to go to that. All right. So always remember this. Whenever we are creating containers, we are going with Docker files, not the other ways. There are other ways of creating binary images and all of that. That's the most hopeless way because they are not maintainable. Most important aspect is maintainable and reproducibility. Whenever you go with tar files, you are hitting on those two, right? The scripts are no longer maintainable because you don't know what is in there. Okay, you see a tar file and tar is untarred and you are getting your application. You don't know what is happening around. That's not a right way of doing the things, right? So let us, any problems which you are seeing, please try it over here. Yeah. Okay, fine. Let me go back to the statements which we were discussing. Okay, so this was our use case, right? So tomorrow technology might change, then your steps will change. That's it. But the approach which you are following doesn't change. So now I am doing for Tomcat application. Let it be WebSphere, let it be WebLogic, or let it be anything. The steps are important here. Steps are very much important, right? So I have a war file. Okay, this war file I have to basically copy into Tomcat web apps folder, right? So one way is take a image, install Java, and install Tomcat, and then copy the war file. Works, nothing wrong in that. Or the other approaches, we use from, right? What is from? From is a base image, right? It can, whenever you are creating any image, you should always use from. So here, what is that we need? Tomcat. Do you all agree to that? Tomcat is the application which you are looking out for. Our application will also be running on Tomcat. So if there is a Tomcat image, why can't I take that as a from? Because the only thing which I have to do is copy war file. Are we getting the whole point? If I have a Tomcat image already, I'll be taking that image, and in that image I'll be copying my war file. My problem solved. So it's your choice now. There is nothing saying that the first approach is wrong, this is better. I would say this is simple. I would say this is simple because you already have Tomcat, and the only thing which you are trying to do is install the stuff. Is it making sense? Right? There is nothing called as right or wrong. Okay, whether you take it a base image and do all of it on your own, wonderful. There is nothing wrong with that. Or someone else has already developed a Tomcat image, take that and basically use it only for deploying your application. Right? Shall we use that? Yeah. Now, to do that, I should be inside my Linux machine to do that. Approach అర్థమైంది కదా? We have two approaches. One is everything build on your own, or take something which has already some of the things within it and then continue basically with your work. right? If I was writing containers, I would take the work which has already been completed and I'll be doing only my portion rather than rebuilding everything. All right? Okay. First, let me log in into my Docker machine. Okay. Yeah. Okay. For writing Docker images, you can basically use text editor, VI, and all of that. But if you are using it basically to write lot of what do you say, lot of images, and you have a kind of complicated work environment, then what you can do is you can install something called as Visual Studio Code. Okay, just Google for VS Code. All right, since it is Windows, I'll be doing this. Choco install VS Code. Okay, what this will do is this will help you in writing Docker files because it remembers, it knows something about Docker file. It will help you out in writing it, right? But it is not mandatory. Docker file is a text file. You can use Notepad, you can use VI, whatever that makes sense. But if you want it to give some help, use Visual Studio Code. Okay, but for the image which we are trying right now, it is not a very huge image, so it's okay. Fine. I have images, right? Yes. Oh, sorry. Let me create a directory over here. Okay, and this directory I'll be calling it as, because this is the application which I'm trying to build. Okay, and in this I'll be writing a Docker file. Simple. Now, one approach, as I said, do everything on your own. The other approach is take something which has whatever you want. Okay, so what is that I'm looking out for? Tomcat. So if I have a Tomcat, I'm good. So where can I find whether the image is there with Tomcat or not? Go to Docker Hub. Okay, go to this Explore. All right, wait till the page is loaded. Yes, search for something called as Tomcat. Okay, so whenever you are seeing images, okay, let me come back to here. You will see image where there was only Tomcat, and then you are seeing other Tomcat images where it is something like right control slash Tomcat. So in Docker, remember one thing: wherever you are not seeing the slash symbol, those are official images. Those are official images. So for example, if I create a Tomcat image, my username is quality thought, so the name of the image will be quality thought slash Tomcat. So when officials are doing it, you will just have the name of the image. But if it is non-official stuff, someone else has developed, it might be good or bad, that's a different story. But official images generally don't have slashes, right? For example, if you can observe between this and this. Right control is also a decent organization. You can use that image also. There is nothing wrong. But this is an official image. This is an official image. And similarly, you are seeing Bitnami slash Tomcat. That is another organization. It is not Tomcat. It is other organization providing Tomcat for you. So, did you got the difference? So generally for official images, you will not have that slash. That's a Docker's convention, right? So let me get into this official. I want to go with official image rather than really going with some other stuff. And here, if you see, these are all the tags which we have. These are all the tags which we will have. Okay, so this is Tomcat 7 with Java 8. This is Tomcat 8 with Java 7. Okay, and you scroll down, you would see loads and loads of stuff. All right, so let us take Tomcat 8 with Java 8. I think that is it, right? This is what it is. So shall I take this? Okay, this will consist of Tomcat 8 with Java 8 image. Right, before using this, before writing this in from directly, let us see what he has done is in his Docker file. because we slightly understand what a Docker file is. So what is his from? So for installing Tomcat, he has not started from a base image. He has taken the Java image, a container which already has Java installed, and he is basically taking the, he is just installing Tomcat in that. We are following the same approach. We wanted our application to be deployed rather than starting from scratch. I'm taking Tomcat, right? And then he has done whatever it is, right? So shall we try this? Okay. Now from, sorry, from Tomcat colon 8.0 hyphen JRE8. Is the name matching? Yes. Now let me come back to one important point over here. Whenever you are taking from image, please don't take latest. So don't try it from Tomcat. Why? What is the problem with taking latest versions? No, it is supported. That's why you have taken it. Latest is not a fixed version. It changes every time. Latest 1 year ago for Tomcat was Tomcat 7. Now it is Tomcat 8. Tomorrow it might be Tomcat 9. So if you build your container image after 1 year, then it was supposed to be on Tomcat 8, but it will build on Tomcat 9. So that's why whenever you're writing from, please be explicit about the version. Don't use latest. Don't use latest. From image name colon tag. Okay. మీకు అది లేటెస్ట్ అయినా ట్యాగ్ రాసేయండి. So for example, latest version also will have some tag. Use that. Don't go with latest. Did you understood what is the problem with latest? Today it might be fine, but after 2 months, after 1 year, it might not give you the same result. So always try to give this. Okay. And next step is very much simple. Okay. Fine. And then what is that I need to do now? I have Tomcat already. Okay. I need to copy my var file, basically from here into my container or into my image. Sorry, it is not container, it is into image. So how do I do that? If it was a local machine, I would have used SCP, but here we don't have SCP stuff. Okay. For doing copy or paste kind of works, we have two instructions. One is add, the other one is copy. Okay. Whenever you want to copy files into your Docker images, we have only two instructions for that. Okay. So let us stop it at here and let us go back. Okay. Into instructions, add versus copy Docker. This is almost every time they ask this interview question. Very popular interview question, right? So fine. Copy and add both are Docker file instructions, and both are used to copy some file into your image. No problem. Copy takes src as a destination. It will let you only copy the local file or directory from your host. Add will support two other resources. One is URL. Okay. So what is the difference between add and copy? Copy will allow you to only copy local. If you have it in your system, will be using copy. But let us assume that the file which you want to basically put in your container is on the internet. Then you can't use copy. Then you can use add, because add takes HTTP URLs also. That's the difference. Apart from that, they are exactly the same. So the syntax of add is very much simple. You have to give add. Okay. Let me write it over here so that we will have add or copy are used to, okay, get files. Okay. Add can download from internet. Sorry. Add can download, whereas copy cannot. The general syntax will be add src destination. src is your system or your internet url, and then destination is where do you want it to be on your container. Simple, right? Similarly, copy is also the same, src dest. But the only point is, in copy, whenever you are giving src, it should be your local system's path. It should be your local system's path. Now it is your choice whether the resource is present on the internet, whether the resource is present over the stuff. If you use add as an instruction, add can work on both the cases. All right. So have a habit of using add, because both are the same. All right. Okay. So now let me use add, but for doing this add, I need to have game of life var here. But I don't have a var file in this system. I had var file on the other system. So what I would do is, let me try to copy that. Okay. So for copying, I'll be using SCP. I'm copying it from my Windows system onto the Linux system. Source is gameoflife.var. Destination is this, and on this machine, I want it into home Ubuntu. Generally, it should be faster than this. Okay, I'll come back to the questions later. Yeah. So let me just finish this activity and then I'll come back to the questions. So now let me log in into this machine. Okay. Now I have game of life.var over here. So I'll copy that game of life.var into images, and I'm trying to build something from game of life. So let me get into that folder, images / game of life. Okay. And where is the game of life.var now? In my local folder. So whenever you are writing the paths, you can give full paths of your system in the add or source. But always remember, it is always safer to give a relative path. Let me tell you what is the reason. Let us assume you are doing it on Windows. I'll tell a Windows example so that it is relative for you. You have put this directory in your D drive, and for in your system, the game of life.var is in D drive. So in the Docker file, you have written an instruction saying that add D drive : game of life.var. Okay. And now I want to build your image on my system, but in my system, I don't have a D drive. I just have C drive. Problem, right? So if I give relative path, I'll be taking the complete folder from you. I'll be doing Docker build. I don't mind where is the directory, because I'll be giving the paths which are relative to Docker file. And the Docker file, from Docker file, what is the path where your game of life.var is available? That's what I'll be using. And that's always the better way. Always the better. Don't use absolute paths. Always use relative paths. All right. Absolute paths add dependencies to your Docker files. Don't do that. So now this is simple. Vi Docker file. Okay. So I'll be using add. Okay. Add takes source. Source is, what is source? Game of life.var. And then the other point is destination. The problem is we don't know the destination. We don't know the destination. And to know this destination, what is the best thing? Create a container, get into it, find the paths, okay, and then copy and paste it over. Okay, fine. Shall we do that? So I'll be just running docker run -it. I don't want to run the application. I'm interested in getting inside the container to see what is in there. So tomcat : 8.0 -jre8. If I'm not wrong, that is what I have used. Yes, makes sense, right? And then I have to use bin /bash. So this we know what is happening. It has find it asked in the local repository, do I have an image called as Tomcat? Okay, then the answer was no, so it is downloading it from Docker Hub. Good. So we are inside. So what is the path? User local Tomcat. Let me do ls. Are we seeing any folder called as web apps? Okay, so the path would be user local Tomcat / web apps. Right. So my problem is solved. I came to know whatever I wanted, so I will do exit. So let me copy this path. Okay, so destination is web apps / game of life.1. Simple. So problem is solved. Now the important part. This is for image building, it is done. But whenever you start your game of life container, what should happen? Okay, add here we have not written run because there is no need for any run statement. The only thing which I have to do is I have to copy the file. That's it, because I have everything was done already by my parent image. Now the important activity is what should happen when I am starting this container. What should happen? Tomcat, if it is started, that is enough. And Tomcat starting, if I am not wrong, my base parent image might have already done it, right? Case onto that. Starting the Tomcat might have already done by my base image. So why do I want to do anything different? Are we getting the point? Starting the Tomcat is already achieved by my parent image. So I will go to the parent image's Docker file and find out what he is doing, and I'll try to do the same thing. Making sense? Right? That is because his motive of starting the container and my steps in starting the container are exactly the same. I will try to do something different when I have to do something differently. Here I don't need to do anything differently. So let me get into the Docker file and see what is this. What is this command? Blindly copy this, because the start statement for our image which we are trying to build and for the Tomcat is no different. For the Tomcat is no different. Now, does this application, whatever you are trying to build, use any ports? Ports vaartunda idi? Yes, 8080. So be explicit about it. So since my application is using the port, I'll be writing something called as expose 80. Yesterday, whenever we have looked at this, or whenever we thought of this, we thought that we had to do a lot of stuff. But see, we have done this in 4 lines. Not a very difficult stuff. If you know what you are doing, this is very much simple. Right? Is it making sense, or do you have any trouble in this? Yeah? So I've taken the Tomcat image. The only thing which I've done is, in the Tomcat, what is our step? We have to copy our var file. So I've used the add statement. And then my application requires 8080 port. I've done that. Okay. And to start my container, I don't need to do anything separately. Whatever, the only thing which I have to do is I have to start Tomcat. So for starting the Tomcat, my parent image has already done something. So I'm copying and pasting the same thing. Okay. Simple. Shall we try to build the image out of it? Yes. Pardon me? Catalina.sh should be present somewhere in user local Tomcat. Whatever directory which it is present, and it is trying to run. Yeah. We have to learn some more things yet. I'll come back to that. Okay. Later on, we will be looking into the Tomcat's Docker file and understanding everything. Right. Now, I want to build the image. So Docker build, and I have to give tag. So I will be calling it as -t gol colon 1.0. This is my first version. Docker build -t tag. Okay. Images version, and then where is your Docker file? My Docker file is in the current directory. Simple. This was a command which we have used in the last class also, right? So let us try to do this. What it said? Successfully created. It has not taken much of time. Now, Docker PS. Let us see if there are any images that are running. I want to kill all of them. So how do I do that? Docker rm -f, and I want to remove all. I'm not interested in having anything. So Docker PS. I want to kill all. So I'm using -a. Done. Okay. I want to run only my stuff. So I will be running Docker run. My application is using a port. Yes or no? 8080 port. Right. So 8080 port, my container will open. But how will you access it? Your application is having 8080 port. Okay. The only thing which you have an access to is you have an access to this virtual machine. Okay. You don't have an access to container directly. So are you getting the point? Manaki access దేనికి ఉంది? So for the people who are having slight doubts about it, let us try to visualize whatever we have done. So this is the virtual machine which I have created, AWS EC2, right? And in that, what is that I have done? I have installed Docker. Docker engine is what I have. Okay. So using Docker, I am creating a container. Container will have a virtual network. Container will every container will have its own file system. Every container will have its own process tree. This is what we understood, right? Its own network, not the network which you and me know. So my laptop is over here. Let us assume that this is my laptop. From my laptop, what is it I can access? EC2 machine or a container? But where is our Tomcat running? So problem, there is still a problem, right? So how will I access? Basically, I want to access Tomcat which is running inside my container, not my EC2 machine. So here there is a concept called as mapping or port forwarding. What we do is we try to create a mapping between container port and your EC2 machine's port. I'll be trying to tell that, okay, my application on this container is running on a port which is 8080. Yes. And my EC2 machine already has lot of ports. I'll map this 8080 to one of the port of that machine. ఈ 8080 నా కంటైనర్ 8080 పోర్ట్ ని ఫిజికల్ మెషిన్ లో ఏదో ఒక పోర్ట్ కి మ్యాప్ చేస్తా. I'll map this 8080 port of the container to any port of my machine, right? So let us assume that I map it to the same number. So this machine also has 8080, okay, and I want to create a mapping in between these two. Okay, so I'll basically create a mapping between these two. Okay, so user basically accesses EC2 machine's 8080 port and the traffic will be forwarded to my container. Is it making sense? Right? So we have to do this, right? So for doing this, we will be using something called as port forwarding or port mapping, whatever you call it. Both are essentially the same, right? So to do that, I'll be just trying to tell that I am using port mapping. Okay. The first thing which you are going to write is your EC2 machines or your virtual machines or the machine where you have installed Docker's port. So I am saying that 8080 is the port of my EC2 machine. It should be mapping onto 8080 of my container. Okay. How did we know that the container uses 8080 port? We have just written expose 8080. Right. So for example, if your application has two ports, then you will be writing one more minus p saying that 80 is mapped to 80, whatever it is. So your application can basically expose more than one port also. It is not necessary that it has to expose only one port. Making sense? Right. And then what is our image's name? Right. But I want to give a name to this. So I'll be giving hyphen name. Okay. And then let us give a name called as GOL itself. It's okay. Yeah, simple. Did you understand that minus p there? Okay, any doubts on that? Since we cannot directly access the containers network, we have to go via our physical machines network. So that's why we have done it. If you have an access of the container network directly, then there is no need for you to do this. Container network కనుక మీకు పింగ్ అయితే అసలు ఈ గొడవ లేదు. But actually it will not be pingable because it is a network within the EC2 machine, not outside the EC2 machine. All right. So let us see what happens. What is the mode in which it is running now? Attached mode. If whenever you are seeing any logs, it is an attached mode. It's okay, whatever it is. So what is my EC2 machine's IP address? You can use host name also, but IP address is a convention which all of us understand, so I am taking that. So I am telling http://8080 is my EC2 machine's port. When I click on this, the traffic will be forwarded onto containers 80. That's the whole point, right? And in here I can use game of life. Okay, did we got the application? Whatever it is, I'm not worried what that application does. My intention was to build an image which consists of game of life. Tomorrow my customer wants to see how the game of life works. The only thing which I have to do is I have to push this image to the Docker hub and tell my image's name, and he has to run something like docker run -p. Let us assume my account's name was quality thought, so quality thought /gol -p 80:8080 or whatever it is. Okay, give your rest of the stuffs and he will get the same application. He'll get the same application. All right. So in my world I am pushing it to Docker hub. In your company you might push it to Docker hub or any other Docker repository. It is not mandatory that it has to be Docker hub every time, right? But did you got the essence of it? Right. Now imagine that you have to give it to the testing team. Testing team doesn't need any application, doesn't need any install, any server, nothing. They just need a system where Docker is installed, and they will be executing basically docker run your image's name, whatever parameter your images takes. Simple. Yes. Okay, right. Now this is not the right way of doing it. Whenever you cannot stop user from using the Linux machine. So what I do is I'll do Control C. Let me do docker ps now. Is the image still running? Okay, this is the problem. So whenever you do this in a attached mode, and if you want to come out of the terminal, you will do Control C and your application is stopped. Control C is an exit statement. All right. So for avoiding this, what you would do is you would just basically let me remove the existing containers. So for that, I think we have already have written the steps. Yes. Okay. Now I'll be running the same command whatever I've ran in the earlier case, but I'll be adding one more stuff to this, where I'd be saying that I want to run this, I'm good, but I want to run this in detached mode. Okay, when I run in detached mode, what would happen is container will be running, but it will be running in the background. It will be running in the background. See what happens. So when you run in detached mode, the only thing which will return it to you is container ID. Container ID. Now your question is, what will happen if I want to see the logs? I want to see the logs. Your application might be a failure, or your application might have failed, right? So you can just say docker logs, and what was your container's name or container ID, whatever it is. Why are the same logs being appeared here? If you remember, when I was running in attached mode, I have seen all of this, right? Simple, right? So when we are running the application, we don't run them in the foreground mode. We will always run in the background mode, which is attached or detached, right? Now you are running the application in the attached mode or detached mode, and now you want to get inside the container. Is it possible? The answer is you can use attach command. Okay, but I would basically try to use one more command which is much better than that, because we have something called as docker exec, docker execute. Okay, docker execute, and then give the container name and tell what is that you want to execute. Okay, so let me do this. Docker execute. What is our container's name or container ID? What you can use any of that. So my container's name is gol, right? And the command which I want to execute is ls user local. So this is what an executable is. What executable does is it will execute a command and it will print out the results onto your system, but actually this command results are from your container. Yes. So for any checking of any simple commands which you want to do, there is no need for you to get inside the container. You can try something like this. But still, if you want to get inside the machine, then what you would do is you will use the same Docker exes. And this time you will be telling that I want to execute, but I want to execute in the interactive terminal. I want to execute in the interactive terminal. Okay. On a container which is game of life. And my terminal is present at bin slash, see where you are. Okay. Now you will execute some commands like ls or whatever it is. All right. You can get into and do whatever you want to do on this machine. But remember, whenever you want to come out, don't use exit because exit will kill the container. Control C, kill the container. So how will you come out now? So every container will have something called as exit. What is a exit codes, right? So whenever you want to come out of this terminal but not kill the terminal, the default key which is being used is Control PQ. Plus press the control key and then P and Q. PQ. Control PQ. So let me write it over here because control plus PQ. Okay. Plus is I'm just referring not the plus key. When I say control, I mean that you have to press all of this Control PQ all together. So let me use that. Control. It is an escape sequence. All right. So this is documented with very small letters and all of that. In some containers, you can override this. I want to use some other characters for this. There are these key escape sequences which Docker file can take, but generally we will not play with that. Generally, we will not play with that because for that the user of this container should know your escape sequences. So we will like it to be on the defaults. మార్చగలమా చేయొచ్చు, మారుస్తామా చేయము. Because let us assume that you have changed your escape sequence and then I am using your container and I try to use control PQ. I'll not be able to come out of your container. What will be my next step? I'll kill the container and I'll restart the container. Why do you want to get into all of this mess? So leave certain things to default. Leave certain things to default. Can't we override it? Yes, you can override it. But is there any advantage of overriding it? No. Right? Simple now. Right? Okay. Now we have written all of these steps and then we have done this. Right? Now let us have a look at our image once. Vi. Simple. Better way of doing basically stuff. Now this image, whatever you have written, can be hosted on any cloud. Any cloud. Azure, Google, Oracle. You need not even need to know the environment. Any environment that supports Docker, your application is executable over there. You need not worry about Windows, Linux. Gone now. The only thing which you need to worry is Docker supported or not. Right? So I can take this image, publish it onto the Docker Hub, right? And I can run it on Windows. I can run it on Mac. I can run it on every other operating system where Docker works. That's the best part. And every other cloud migration becomes very simple for me because the only thing which I have to do is I have to take this image onto the cloud. Take this image onto the cloud. So that's why companies want to leverage this, because once you containerize your application, then there is no other dependency that comes into play. There is no other dependency that comes into play. Right? Fine. Now let us try to go and look at this image where we have taken, and there are many other things over here. There is something called as env, right? If you want to define any environment variables inside your container, then you will be using that env state. if you want to define any environment variable. So for example, now let me go ahead, okay, and I say env, okay, name of your environment variable, my env, and then I will say 8.0, whatever it could be, whatever it could mean. I'm not worried what it means, but the only point is I've defined an environment variable. So for your application, if it requires any environment variable, some applications requires environment variables to be executed, that you can pass via this, that you can pass via them, right? Now let us come down, okay. So generally, if you remember yesterday while we created the container, when we did docker exec minus it the container bin bash, we were in the root folder, we were in the root folder. But when we logged in into this tomcat container, we are getting into user local tomcat directly. Yes or no? Did we observe that difference? Yesterday I had created an image, okay, from Ubuntu echo or touch1.txt or something like that, okay. And when I got into that container, when I did get inside that container, the path where I was into was a root directory. But in the case of tomcat, where is that I'm going? User local tomcat. How is that happening? That is happening because of the work dir. Are you seeing this work dir statement? Okay, work dir is a default directory, default working directory inside your container. By default it is root, but if you want to change it, you will be using work dir. So here what is that you have used? Work dir dollar. Dollar is to expand a variable, okay. Are you seeing anything called as catalina.home set? So what is the value of catalina home? What is the value of catalina home in that file? So whenever we are logging, where is that we are getting into? That's the point, okay. So whenever you want to change the directory in which your application is basically, okay, should be logged in or should be present in some specific directory, then you will be using that work dir statement, okay. Did we got the difference? If I don't have work dir, what will happen when I log in into the container? In which folder I'll be there? Root, okay. So for example, if I say that whenever you get inside the container, you should be in a folder called as home/ubuntu, what will be your steps? In docker file you would be writing workdir/home/ubuntu. That's it. That's the simplest part of it, all right. And then environment variables are fine, okay. There are multiple environment variables, and there is a run statement. There are run statements, okay. These are the run statements to install tomcat once you have java. We didn't require any what do you say, run statements, because we were not executing any linux command. The only command which you wanted was copy the war file, right? Okay, now things are looking good. Now let us build one more version of our image. Docker build -t gol colon 1.1, right? The only difference is I have one more environment variable, right? Now let me run this. Docker run -8. I want to get inside the container. I don't want to run the application. That's not my intention. Gol colon 2.0 slash bin slash oh 1.1, sorry, yes. Okay, are you seeing, are we set is a command which will display all of your environment variables, right? Am I seeing an environment variable called as myenv which has a value of 8.0? This is what happens, all right. And apart from that, all the other environment variables which were part of your parent image will also be present over here. For example, catalina home. Are you seeing catalina home? This was not defined by us, this was defined by my parent image. So the containers which are the environment variables which are designed in my parent images also will be shown here, right? If you want to change that, you can change that. That can be overridden, all right? Simple, all right? Okay, now let us get into the complicated parts. Fine. You are seeing run statements, right? How many run statements are you seeing? You have seen here, there is one run, two, any other runs, three, and four. Okay. Why four? Why not every Linux command in one statement? Because the only thing which he is trying to do over there is he's trying to basically execute some Linux statements. So when I'm executing a Linux statement, why not every statement in one run command, or all the statements in one run command? Why they are trying to separate it out? Understanding here? Are you understanding anything now? Run statement. No, number of run statements will not improve your understanding. Not definitely not for maintenance purposes, right? So let me try to do this. Shall we'll go to the Docker and let us try to pull one more Docker image of the Tomcat. I'll try to do 9, right? Shall I do this? 9? Yeah. So Docker pull Tomcat colon 9.0. All right. Colon JRE. What is the JRE which will take? ఏదైతే ఏమైందండి JRE 10 మనం వాడేది కాదుగా, రైట్? So what are these different download statements? With every run statement you will get one layer. That's the whole concept around it. So if you write a lot of run statements, then you will be seeing a lot of layers like this. When you write only one run statement, you will be seeing only one layer. In this we had only 4, but we have many over here because 4 plus we have a parent image which is OpenJDK. It might have some run statements and all of that. So this is basically the layers that will be downloaded. What is an advantage? What is an advantage of using this approach? Let me try this. So let me try to pull this Tomcat. Okay, I'll be pulling one more image. Docker pull Tomcat colon 9.0 hyphen JRE 8. I'm not sure whether that image is existing or not, but let us try. See what is the stuff which are you seeing anything called as already exists? That is for reusability. Okay, these image layers, for example, OpenJRE 8, the layers whatever are present over here might have already been present in your system. If they are already present in your system, they don't download again. Okay, they are basically used again. Are you seeing those IDs? Every layer will have a unique ID. Okay, inside any container that is going to come, or inside any image which you are going to build again in your near future, okay, if it comes across an ID which is matching that ID, it will not download it, it will reuse it. It will reuse it. For example, in this case, if you see, when I was pulling this image, I have only 2 layers which are different. Avuna kada? 2 layers which are different, but rest of all the layers are already existing. So what is happening? Even though you take 2 images, okay, so let me do this Docker images. So what is the size of Tomcat JRE 8 and JRE 10? What is the size? 467 MB. So 2 467 MBs, generally we multiply it 2 into 467 MB, but eventually it might not be that. There might be some layers on your system where 300 MB might be reused, okay, in both the images, and only 160 MB is different. So 300 plus 2 into 160. So it optimizes also at the storage layers. Okay, so this image layer concept is very important. Okay, because here you don't have the complete disk, you have layers. Okay, and this image layer leads us to a discussion of something called as union file system. Union file system. Okay, so whenever you build a Docker image, every run statement leads to a image layer. Every run statement leads to a image layer. Okay, so if you have multiple run statements, multiple image layers. So what is the best way? For example, if you are building two applications, and in two applications there is MySQL, right? Or let us not MySQL, let us assume that in two applications you require some directory structure, always same directory structure. So rather than writing them in different run statements, try to create a run statement which will give you the directory. So what would happen is probably that might be reused. Okay, that is for optimization. I'll be elaborate on this whole discussion, but one thing which you need to understand is whenever you write a run, every run statement leads to a image layer. And in Docker, the hard disk or the storage is not a full disk, but it is combination of layers. It is combination of layers. For example, in the earlier case we have seen that whenever we are trying to build the Docker 9, it has these many layers, but see how many are used. That's the whole point. So Docker tries to optimize at every front, all right? Okay, now when we discuss further after taking questions on this image layers, all right, I'll be elaborating on one more thing. When I run two containers, all right, two containers are image will be executed, so 2 into 467 MB, yes. So let us assume it is 500. So we expect it to be taking the storage of 1 GB whenever we are running two containers, but Docker doesn't do that. Docker doesn't does that. It will be using 500 plus x into 2 or x plus y, whatever it is. That's how it works, right? It is optimized at every front. It is optimized at every front. It will not use lot of storage. It will not use lot of memory and all of that, right? Now my Dockers are running. Are there any containers which are running in my case? Yes. So I want to understand how much memory are they consuming. So I'll be using Docker. So this will give you all the parameters. They are refreshed. They are refreshed on their own. Okay. So this was not there when we started at least our Docker classes. Okay, 2 or 2.5 years ago when we started our classes, this command was not there, right? So now we have this. Similarly, later down the line, we might see something like htop, where you see all the CPU cycles and all of that. But this is what we have now, right? Making sense? Okay. One important thing. There is one more important instruction. Okay. In Docker, we have one more instruction which will act much like CMD, which is entry point. Which is entry point. Okay. Shall we try what it is? Yeah. Man, I thought I was in a container. It's fine. Okay. So let me build some images. I want to build some dummy image, not a very serious image. So CD, what is that we have? Let me go into Docker images. That's fine. My first is what we have, right? Okay. So let me take that my first. Okay. So CD images, and in here I have my hello world lsvi Docker file. So what is CMD over here? Echo my first image. Wonderful. So when I build this image, I run it like Docker run, and what is the name of the image? My first. Since it is latest image, I don't need to give any version after that. Okay. I run this, and what is that I would get? Echo statement. Whatever I have written in the echo is printed. Now let me try this. Docker run my first. Right? And after this, I'm writing a statement which is echo. Okay. Or okay, let it be echo. What is it printing? After the image name, I have typed a Linux command. Yes or no? There was echo my first image, and after this I have typed a Linux command. Now, whatever I have written in this has overwritten whatever was there in CMD. Do you agree to that? Yes. Okay. So whenever you use a CMD, the starting point can be changed. The starting point can be changed. Okay. So you can override by passing whatever commands which you want to pass after you have filled in your image name. So docker run your image's name, and once after this any commands which you type over here will go and overwrite whatever is there in the CMD. If you don't write anything over here, whatever is there in the CMD will be executed. Is it making sense? Right. But let us assume you don't want this to happen. You don't want this to happen. For example, you want to build an image which is something like this: vi docker file, which should always print something. Which should always print something. But what it prints is your choice. By default, I'll be printing my first image. If you want, you can change the print statement. Okay. So what does this mean? Echo aithe kachithanga jaragali. Echo should happen for sure. And in the echo, what it should print, you have a choice. But can I achieve that using CMD? So whenever you want to have always a fixed starting point for your container, then you will go for something called as entry point. So in the entry point, what I would do is I do this entry point, and in the entry point, I would say that I want to use echo, and over here I'll say my first image. Making sense? So let me reiterate on this. What is it I have changed? Executable I have moved to the entry point. Arguments I have put it command. Now what will happen is, whenever you try to build an image after this, and whenever you try to write anything after the image name, you are not changing entry point, you are only changing command. Okay. And what will be executed is entry point plus command. What will be executed is entry point plus command. So let me go over here and build this image. Docker build -t my first image colon 2.0. All right. Okay. Now let me run this. Docker run my first image colon 2.0. No difference, because I have not passed anything. It has not changed anything. It has done its job. Now let me do this and give something like echo. Okay. What was the stuff which I have given? Don't. But now see what happens. Whatever you give after that, it is not going to change. Okay. All of this it has treated as a text. Right. In the earlier case, echo was executable and it is a text. Now see what it happens. So the only thing which you are supposed to change over here is an argument, not really executable. So you type anything, so it will just print that. Okay. Here you have fixed the executable and you have given option of variables to your command. If you don't want to even give that, don't write CMD. In your container, if you don't want an option where user can change anything, don't write CMD. Only write entry point. So then he can't change anything. Even he tries to do something, nothing will happen. దాని తర్వాత అతను ఏమని రాసినా ఇగ్నోర్ అయిపోతుంది. So it depends. So one thing is whether you want to give a flexibility of changing a startup command. If your answer is yes, you will go for CMD. Next use case is you want to basically fix the executable, but you want to give an option to change the arguments. Then you will write both entry point and CMD. If you want to just user should not change anything in the startup, then you will write just entry point. You have these three options. Making sense? Right? So do we understand what from is now? Add or copy, env, expose, right? and then we have CMD and entry point, right? Every run statement leads to a creation of new image layer. Do you agree to that? Yes. What is the image layer? Reusable storage area. Reusable storage area. Fine. Now let me look at questions. We had discussed a lot. I think I'll have a lot of questions to answer. Let us see. In real time, do we create Docker images for every dev release, or taking the old release and installing the new code? You will be building the Docker image. If your company is religiously following Docker, Docker will be built with every time the code is built. A Docker image is being created for every time the code is being built. And who builds your code? Your continuous integration. So building the image is automated at the continuous integration layer. So what we will do is, you have written this Docker file, right? Yeah. You will take this Docker file and copy it into the game of life code. We have seen the game of life code, right? In the game of life code, on the root folder, you will place this Docker file. Are you getting the whole point? So for game of life, did we return the Docker file? Yes or no? Yes. So let me go to game of life war. Okay. So basically what I will do is, I'll go and copy my Docker file somewhere here. So your Docker file is part of code now. So every time when the code is compiled, then they will be doing this Docker build statement, whatever it is. Okay, and your continuous integration will be built. So every time your code is being built, you can build Docker. It is your company's choice whether they want to build it with every build or every stable build or every release. That is your company's choice. Right? Yeah. We generally don't worry about what is the old image and all of that. We try to rebuild this stuff. Right. No extension required for a Docker file. You can put extensions, as I said, but if you use Docker file, it doesn't need you to change anything. But if you put any other file, you in the build statements, Docker build -t, and then you have to give -f and give the path of your file. So why do you want to pass an extra argument when it is quite simple? That's the whole point. How many servers can we install in a Docker container maximum? Servers. I think the question is the other way around. In the server, how many containers I can have? Is that your question? Or if your question is in the Docker, since I have installed Tomcat, how many different kinds of stuffs can I install? There is no limit. There is no limit. But remember, what was the design of Docker? Docker container is supposed to be simple and doing only one part of your application. Doing only one part of your application, which we call it as microservice. So you will not have many servers. So once you try to make this Docker container big, you are creating one more virtual machine. Remember that. So for that, you have a better technology. నేను కంటైనర్లో ఇప్పుడు డాకర్ కంటైనర్లో సీక్వెల్ సర్వర్ పెట్టుకుంటాను, మై సీక్వెల్ పెట్టుకుంటాను, పోస్ట్ గ్రెస్ పెట్టుకోండి, తప్పులేదు. బట్ యు ఆర్ మేకింగ్ దిస్ డాకర్ యాజ్ ఎ VM. బెటర్ గో ఫర్ ఎ VM because there you will have a closer control, right? So whenever you want things to be smaller and scalable, container is an answer for that, right? Yeah. Official images are created by Docker only. Official images are not created by Docker. Official images are created by the companies who create that applications. Tomcat Docker image is created by Apache Tomcat. So the company who, similarly, there is an image called as Ubuntu in Docker Hub that is created by Ubuntu itself. The organization who creates that software is creating a Docker image. Then we call it as an official image. All right? Okay. Sometimes latest version is not stable. Yeah, I think that was the answer for the question why you don't use from latest. From latest is sometimes the latest version is not always fixed. Today it might be Java 8, tomorrow it might be Java 9, day after tomorrow it might be Java 10. So we should always, whenever you run this command, whether it is today or 2 days after or 1 month after or 1 year after, it should always give you the same image but not a different image. So that's why we fixed that. Okay. If we just have the code, how we build it on Docker? First, even in this case, you just have a code, game of life code. Game of life of code, you have compiled it into something called as var, and that var you are using. That is how the strategy would be, right? First, code should be compiled, and then you should know how your code is basically executed in the customer environment, and then you try to write a Docker file which does that, right? Okay. When we do SCP, don't we need to provide the full path of the file? Here in this case, game of life file is in your local system. It was in my local directory. So that's why I've given only the relative path, right? Okay. It is always a problem to copy the war files from local machine to Docker machine. Yes, it is always a problem when you are always doing it. Okay, but if you build the game of life war file on the Linux machine itself, then you will not have this problem, right? So in your enterprise scenarios, that is the case. ఇక్కడ క్వశ్చన్ ఏంటంటే గేమ్ ఆఫ్ లైఫ్ వార్ ఫైల్ నా విండోస్ డెస్క్టాప్ లో ఉంది, నేను ప్రతిసారి లినక్స్ మెషిన్ లో కాపీ చేస్తున్నాను, అది ప్రాబ్లం కదా. Okay, there are two answers for that. Generally, whenever you are building a image, okay, Docker image, game of life war file is present already with you, or you will be given a URL where game of life war is present. So both the problems doesn't need you to copy or basically upload gameoflife.war, right? Why we need to expose 8080? Because our application is will be running on a port which is 8080, because it uses Tomcat, right? To access our application, the port that is required is 8080. So if I'm using MySQL, or if I'm building a container for MySQL, what is the port that MySQL uses? 3306. Then I would have written a statement called as expose 3306. So you should know what your application, which port it runs on. That is the port on which my application runs, right? Okay. Game of life.war is present on which path? Okay, 1 minute. You just tell me how, on which path it is. Where it is present? It is present in the Tomcat home directory / web apps. That's what I've done, right? That's where it should be, right? Okay. So is Docker automatically identify the war file since we are not giving the complete path? Okay. Where are you building this command from? When you build this image, from which directory are you building? ఎక్కడ నుండి బిల్డ్ చేస్తున్నారు ఇమేజ్? నేను ఇమేజ్ ఎక్కడ నుండి బిల్డ్ చేశాను? In this directory. In this directory, what are the contents? Are you seeing anything called as gameoflife.war here? So whenever you're building image, it is picking up from here, right? Okay. I didn't use the expose, still want to access -p while starting the container. Yeah, it will be implicitly invoked, because if you don't use expose and still want to do the port mapping, it will still work. Expose will generate the metadata, which is very much required. Since you have written the Docker image, you know that I will be using 8080 port. Okay, the Docker image that is written by you, if someone else wants to use it, how will he know that you have to use 8080? Will you write a documentation every time? That's the whole point. That's why we put that expose statements, so that whenever you run your Docker container, right? So for example, I do this. Let me basically go over here, Docker ps. Are you seeing this? Yeah. If you have created a mapping, whenever you do Docker ps, it will show like this. If you have not done the mapping, it will basically say that the container is exposing a port called as 8080 on the TCP layer. If you don't write expose, you will not see that. If you don't write expose, you will not see that. So if you don't see, for example, if you are given this image to someone who doesn't know how to run the application, he will not be knowing that it will be working on 8080 port. That's the advantage. It is for metadata, right? Expose raste jarige advantage adi. Okay, and generally we want that advantage, because if the person has forgot to do some mapping, he can always obviously do it on other container or whatever it is, right? It will be accessible. I'm not saying that it will not be accessible, but you will not see that, right? How to add comment to Docker file? What do you mean by comment? I think in the Docker file, use hash. Yes, use hash. EC2 machine also uses port 8080. Then what should be done? Do the mapping to 8081. Is it required for our application to always use 8080? No. So generally, when we go into Kubernetes and all of that, our applications will be running on ports like 65,535 and all of that. So we'll not be using the smaller ports, we'll be using the larger ports, larger port numbers. So it doesn't matter. Okay, we will never do this minus p 8080 colon 8080. We'll always do minus p 65,535 colon 8080, and then we'll slowly come down. That's how it is. So that should not be a problem. Can we override control PQ? Answer is yes. I will never do it if I was you, because the user of my image might have a problem working on my image. So I'll leave it to defaults. Escape sequences I am not going to change, right? But if you want to change in the Docker file, there are instructions, right? Signal SIGINT, okay, and then similarly you will have some instructions like kill escape sequences. You can override all of that, but I am not going to do, and I am not going to recommend it also. All right, it doesn't make any sense, right? It makes sense only in the case whenever you are building a Docker image for some hardware. So for example, I am building a Docker image for router, Wi-Fi router. Router lo already control PQ ante vere functionality edo undi. That is the only case when I'll change that, right? But I am quite sure that no one over here is going to build Docker images for hardware devices, all right? So don't worry about those cases, all right? We can do source to a file and add multiple environment variables. How can we do it inside the container? You can do it using the same thing, because you are having a Linux, you're telling me about a Linux command, and inside the container what you have is a Linux environment, so you should be able to do the same, right? How come Tomcat 8s, two Tomcat 8s we are seeing? Because I have run it twice. అంతకుమించి ఏమీ లేదు, అంతే. దాని అంతటా ఇది రాదు, నేను రన్ చేస్తేనే వస్తుంది. సో రైట్, ఓకే. If my initial image has downloaded required run statements and two images has taken one previous, man, that is like a puzzle. Hurry, please simplify it. It is too much for me. All right. Yeah. Does container updates automatically? No, they don't. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Does container will not update based out of image, and remember, image will not be updated automatically. Every update of the image needs to have a different tag. Okay, my statement whenever I am saying from latest, don't use it, because after some point, let us assume that you have a Docker file and you want to build the same environment. That is a scenario which I am speaking about. Docker images don't upgrade automatically. Similarly, Docker containers don't upgrade automatically. Okay, if I want to change anything in Docker image, I will have a new tag. Okay, so with new tag I cannot run the old container, so obviously it has to be a new container. That's how it is. What user generally use or execute in the place of echo? Echo is just a fun statement, man. You will never use echo, to be very frank, right? Yeah. In real time, do we use your CE or enterprise edition? If your company is rich, you will go for enterprise edition. If it is poor, we will go for CE. Yeah, not a right statement, but yeah, Docker enterprise edition comes up with its own set of features. So for example, like active directory integrations, all of that. So if your company is looking out for that such features and they are running on premise, not on the cloud, then it makes sense. If your company is working on the cloud, you don't need enterprise edition, because the enterprise features are provided by Azure and AWS. These guys provide those features for you, so you don't require it. And also, when we build the image, when we give it to the tester for testing, do they execute docker run minus -it? No, we will give you the command docker run minus p 8080 colon 8080 gol, done. They will get the application. So why do you want to bring trouble to your container by saying that, okay, get into the IT and do it? If the tester has awareness about Docker, he will get into, right? So how can we share local disk to the container? That is in tomorrow's episode, sir. Okay, can we install two Tomcats in the same containers, or we need can you tell me a real-time relevance of having two Tomcat containers in the image? ఏదో అడగాలని అడుగుతాం, కాకపోతే రెండు టామ్క్యాట్లు ఒకే సర్వర్లో పెట్టుకుని ఏం చేస్తాం? Can you tell me any real-time use case around it? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Is your company doing that? No, we don't. We create two virtual machines and install two Tomcats. No. For simulate anyway, you have two containers. Why do you want to have a container with two Tomcats? Are you getting the purpose? Yes. So అది మనం చేయమండి. అది చేతనం అంటే పైశాచికం అది. Because two Tomcat containers use 8080 port and you unnecessarily have to get into the configuration files, change the ports and get into all sorts of trouble. Okay. So yeah, my answer would be don't do that. Create two containers, one with Tomcat 8, the other one with Tomcat 9 in the same machine and test your functionalities. All right, fine. If we don't want to have a deployment of var as part of the image and want to deploy var explicitly after the container creation, can we do it? You can, right? Further, take the Tomcat image. So you don't need your image in that case. So take directly Docker run Tomcat. Okay, get inside the Tomcat container and do whatever you want. So for that, you don't need to write even as your new image. Use Tomcat container directly. The question here is, I don't want to build a image file. I have var file which I want to deploy it onto some container. So if that was the case, just directly use Tomcat container. You don't need your own image. I ran exit command in the container. Container is still running in the daemon mode. Yeah, whatever it is, because it is not an exit term. Exit is not a killing term, right? That's why it is. Docker file is a standard file name. Yes, Docker file is a default file name. I'll not say standard, it is a default file name. You can change it, but in my classroom or in whatever I do in Docker, I'll not change it because I want the convenience of it. Right? Okay. Can we do git pull by using add command? Okay, Docker add instruction, you want to do git pull command? No, because git pull is not a HTTPS command, right? Add what it does, it can access HTTP or a local directory. Git pull is neither HTTP nor local directory. So if you want to do git pull, do it in run. Run statement can do that. Docker container lo నేను image building అప్పుడు చేయాలనుకుంటే run చేయగలదు git pull, not the other stuff. Right? Yes. So any other questions in the room? Yes. Yes, you can. You can, because what we do is tomorrow I'll be speaking about. Today we have looked at port forwarding, right? Tomorrow we'll be looking at hard disk sharing. So what we do is from Docker's internal storage, we'll map it onto our system, and this will pull onto wherever you want. Let it be satellite or let it be Logstash or whatever. Yes. Mm. Exposed port on your physical system. Yes, yes, obviously, yes. You can, but for that you have to. It depends on what kind of orchestration technology which you are using. Okay, so there are basically two kinds of networking in Docker, and on a very general note, one is a single host, the other one is a multi-host. So whenever you are defining, basically you define based out of the protocol stack and all of that. You'll be slightly covering on that because there are two models of doing it. If you want to do it in Kubernetes, the way you follow is different. If you want to do it on Docker natively, the way you do is different. But there is a concept called as driver. You can write your own driver and implement your own networking. Yeah. Yes. Yes, you can. You can just do Docker login and give the URL of your repository. Okay. Yes. Can you run two images at a time? Can you run two commands at a time? That's the answer. If you will be using and ampersand and what I see రెండు కమాండ్లు రన్ చేసేయచ్చు కదా. That is a Linux functionality rather than really a Docker functionality. Yes. No, Tomcat container, every container has its own IP address. Avuna? Every container has its own IP address. So you are running two different containers. So two different IP addresses. So there will not be port conflict on that. But if you are using two containers and mapping onto the same physical port, then you will have a conflict. Every Docker container will get its own IP address. So if one Docker container is using a Tomcat and another Docker container is also using a Tomcat, both are 8080, but both are two different IP addresses. So you'll not have a conflict. That's how it is. Right. Last question. Thanks. How Docker file know that it should pull from parent image from Docker Hub? Yeah, because that is the only place which it knows about. as of now, right? But if you want to make it pull to other stuff, we'll be looking at that when we cover about something called as container registries. Okay, I'll be showing you the Amazon container registry, then we'll basically look into that. All right, but even Amazon container registry knows Docker Hub. Docker Hub is basically parent of all of this, right? Yeah, thanks guys. So what is scp command when we use add command? Add is copying the file while you are building the image. Scp is a Linux file copy command, so they are different, right? They are for different purposes, right? Today you are not using it, but probably after few classes in Docker you might need some containers IP addresses for whatever purposes they are. We have not exposed or discussed on those purposes. Hmm. Hmm, 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 hmm. So for example, in the company, if you have 10 servers where you have to create Docker images, then how will they communicate with each other? Even let it be Kubernetes or a single whatever it is, మీ దగ్గర ఒక డాకర్ ఒక సిస్టమ్ లేదు, 10 సిస్టమ్లు ఉన్నాయి, 10 సిస్టంలో కంటైనర్లు రన్ అవుతున్నాయి, ఒక కంటైనర్ ఇంకో కంటైనర్తో మాట్లాడాలి, అప్పుడు ఐపీ అడ్రస్లు కావాలి. ఇప్పుడు మీకు అవసరం లేకపోవచ్చు. ఇన్ ది సింగిల్ హోస్ట్ మోడ్ యూ విల్ నాట్ హ్యావ్ నీడ్ ఆఫ్ ఇట్, బట్ ఇఫ్ యూ గో టు ద అదర్ మోడ్స్ యూ డెఫినెట్లీ నీడ్ అన్ ఐపీ అడ్రస్. Okay then. So Docker is IP address is automatic or manually you can provide. IP address is generally given by DHCP or that kind of stuff. It is generally, I would say that is automatic. But if you want, you can create your own network inside the Docker. We have not covered that. See, please focus on whatever I am covering. నేను అంతా కవర్ చేస్తాను, నేను ఆ సగంలో ఆపేసి వెళ్ళిపోను. ఓకే, అవసరమైతే 3 రోజులు ఆపి క్లాసులు మొత్తం అంతా మాట్లాడుకుందాం. బట్ వాట్ ఎవర్ ఐ హావ్ డిస్కస్డ్, ప్లీజ్ ఫోకస్ ఆన్ దట్. ఓకే, tomorrow we are going to learn about Docker storage, and day after tomorrow we are going to learn about Docker network, where we discuss about single host networking and multi host networking, and then we will basically slightly introduce what is Swarm. Okay, then we will go ahead with the main orchestration stuff, which is Kubernetes, and after finishing Kubernetes we will not have time, but if I have time I might cover Docker stack. Docker stack is not part of our syllabus, but I'll try to if I find time లేకపోతే అది కవర్ చేయండి. That's how it is. Yes, yeah, thanks. Sunday 7 to 10 you will have uh, application server classes. Okay, so 3 hours of discussion on one app server. If I'm not wrong, it is WebSphere or WebLogic, I'm not sure. Next week you'll have a Tomcat stuff. Okay, so that these classes will help you in understanding how those app servers work, how do you configure them, and all of that. Okay, which will be helpful in your interviews. All right, fine, thanks. Manually, when we provide entry point, which helps us unauthorized user కాదు అసలు. We don't want user to change the behavior. We want user to just pass some additional info. For that case, we will, unauthorized user is already logged in, we can't help it, right? Yeah.